Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make these adorable and not so scary mummies that are actually cakes baked in jars. This forms part of a special Halloween collaboration with Elise, who is MyCupcakeAddiction, and she'll be doing a jack-o'-lantern and a Frankenstein monster.
Let's see what's cooking, let's get the facts. Let's see what's cooking, it's time for yoyomax12.
So to make this recipe, you'll need a large size bowl. In that bowl, place 1.5 cups or 3/4 of a cup of butter that's been brought to room temperature and is softened. Add to that 1.5 cups of white granulated sugar. Blend it together by hand or with an electric mixer until it is light and fluffy. Now you don't have to use a from scratch recipe for this. You can also use a boxed cake mix. Any flavor you want. I just find that a pale colored cake would probably look the best in the jar if you're making the mummy. Now add 2 eggs and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract and blend that until it's nice and smooth. Now add 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and if you're using unsalted butter, add 1/4 teaspoon of salt at this point. Then add 1 1/4 cups of milk and blend that in just until it's combined. So at this point, it's time to add 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour and some pumpkin pie spice. I added 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, and I found that the end result, when I tasted the cake, you had a light but very noticeable pumpkin pie spice taste to the cake. If you like it to be more intense, then I suggest you add 3 teaspoons. Blend that. Don't forget to scrape down the sides of the bowl. You'll have a nice thick and light batter at the end. Now you have to put this in jars. These are canning jars. There's regular old canning jars that you'd put jams and jellies and vegetables in. You need to fill them to about the halfway point, not much higher than that. I'm using a pastry bag to do that just so that I don't get any batter on the top part of the jar. You want to try to keep the top part of the jar as clean as possible, but you can also use a spoon to do that if you're careful. I place my jars in a container and I fill it with hot water to about 2 inches from the bottom of the pan. This will help keep your cake from over browning when it's in the oven. Then you're going to bake these at 350 degrees for about 35 minutes or so. Keep an eye on them. You don't want them to over brown. You just want them to be just cooked enough so when you put the toothpick in the center, it comes out clean. Keep an eye on them. You don't want to over brown them. So there is the cake that's been baked and cooled. I probably over baked this one just a tad because it got a little bit browner than I wanted it to be. So keep an eye on them and take them out when they're just done and try not to get them too brown. Once they're cooled completely, you're ready to put some frosting on there. Now I find that with these cakes in a jar, you have frosting on the top, but when you get to the bottom of the jar, there's no more frosting left. It's just cake. So to try to get frosting all the way down, I'm going to cut out a little chunk out of the cake in the center here, like a little core. So I use a sharp knife, removed the center of the cake, and then you'll be able to put frosting down in the center there. Now the frosting I'm using is just a commercial buttercream frosting that I bought at the grocery store. Now just to show you things aren't always perfect in the Yo-Yo Max kitchen, when I try to use these cheap plastic disposable piping bags, I had one burst on me and I had frosting all over, and I had to transfer all the frosting into one of my more sturdy non-disposable piping bags or reusable piping bags. I buy those cheap disposable piping bags on eBay, and they work great for a lot of things but aren't really great for heavy, thick frosting. Anyway, I cleaned everything up, transferred my frosting into a sturdier piping bag, and then I added more frosting to the top of the jar. I'm using a 1M tip. It gives it a nice little kind of ruffly swirl. And then I added some white sprinkles on the top just for a little bit more decoration. Now for the mummy part of this mummy cake in a jar, I'm going to wrap some bandages around this jar. Start off with a little dab of hot glue. Try to stay below where the thread marks are for the jar lids. And then you're going to wrap some gauze bandage around the jar. I bought these bandages at my local drugstore. I'm sure you can probably find some in most department stores as well, or even in your first aid kit, but just don't forget to replace it if you take it from there. So I wrapped it around the jar a few times around the top, and when I brought it down to the bottom, I tried to make an X shape in the middle of the jar, and that'll be where the face of the mummy goes. I kind of followed the example of the photo on the website where this idea was found. I'll put a link in the description box if you want to see the original idea. So I wrapped it on the top, made an X, wrapped it around the bottom, and where that X is where you're going to put the eyes of the mummy. The eyes are just those little plastic googly eyes that you can find at most craft stores or even your local dollar store. I glued them on with a little bit of hot glue and it is done. If you need to, you can push the bandages down a bit if you want to put a lid on this cake. I put mine in the refrigerator until they were ready to serve. Now, I often get questions on how you get the cake out of the jar. It's not meant to be removed. You're supposed to eat it right out of the jar. Everyone gets their own little jar and a spoon or a fork, and you just scoop it out and eat it. Now, once you're done eating the cake, if you're very careful, you can wash this jar out and use it as a decoration in your home for Halloween. You could even put a little electric candle inside there and make it extra spooky. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my video, I'm sure you are going to love my cupcake addiction. In this video, Elise will show you how to make a jack-o'-lantern and a Frankenstein monster cake in a jar. So go ahead and click right on your screen or check out the link in the description box to that video. Thanks for watching.